Okay, Year 10 and 11, we're here today to look at Literature Paper 2, Section C1, the Unseen Poetry question, which is worth 24 marks. As you watch me answer this question, I'd like you to write down the steps that I take. So unseen poetry, I think, is something that scares us a little bit. But actually, you have all of the skills from English literature and from English language to be able to do a really excellent job on this question. Unseen poetry tests your comprehension of a poem, your ability to read something and understand it, but it also tests your ability to analyse the effects of the writer's use of structure and language. Now, in both English literature and language, you've spent a lot of time looking at structure and language features, so this is your chance to show off everything that you've learned. You, in the exam, have two unseen questions, which is section C1 and section C2. We're going to focus today on this question, which is the 24 mark question, and I'm going to make a separate video for the 8 mark question. So this question is just on a single poem. Now, an important thing to say about this is that the examiners really like this question because they think it's a chance for you to really show off what you know. And every year when we get the examiner's report, they say things like it was a real pleasure to read your engagement with the poems. And actually they think that because it's this poem that you haven't seen before, you're freed from the burden of a prepared poem. So it's a chance for you to be really creative, show empathy and understanding. And actually lots of people outperform their section A and section B responses, which means that you do really well on this question in general. For this question, you need to know poetic techniques. Now, this video is not going to spend time teaching you what they are, but a really important thing to do if you don't know poetic techniques for language and for structure is to revise them. So let's take a look at a question, and I'm going to go through the different steps that you should take to answer it. So the first thing to notice is that this question is 24 marks. I'm going to spend around 30 minutes on this question, around 5 minutes planning, about 25 minutes writing. You have a question focus, which is really going to help you think about what quotes and techniques you're going to pull out. So let's have a look. In autumn, how does the poet present the effects of the season of autumn? So by the word effects, it might be things like, let me think off the top of my head, autumn. How does it affect people? How does it affect nature? How does it affect people's feelings? Let's take a look. Okay, so step 2 is once I've worked out the question focus, which is the effects of the season of autumn, I need to look at the poet's use of structure. Now, there's lots of different techniques that you can think of here. On the right-hand side of the video, you can see a few. I'm going to start with the rhyme scheme of the poem. So let's take a little look. I need to decide what is the rhyme scheme of the poem. Does it rhyme or is it in free verse? So let's take a look. Autumn arrives. I'm going to label that as A, like an experienced robber. Does robber rhyme with arrives? No, so I'm going to put a B. Grabbing the green stuff, C. Tracks, D. Multitude, E. Distractions, F. And so on. And actually going through, I'm just going to skim and scan. I can't see any rhymes. I'm going to take those off and I'm going to write free verse. Now, I'm not thinking at this stage what that is, but I'm thinking what is the rhyme. Let's look at the rhythm. So I need to think, is it regular or irregular? Now, the easiest way to do that is to look at the length of the line. So I notice this one's really short, this one's a bit longer. I've got a really kind of middly one there. Actually, I would say the rhythm, is quite irregular. It's an irregular rhythm because all of the lines have got different lengths. Okay, I'm going to look last of all at enjambment. Now, enjambment is where the lines, sentences run over more than one line. So let's take a look. Autumn arrives like an experienced robber, grab it. Yeah, I can see there's lots of enjambment in this poem. And actually taking a look, I can see a full stop there, full stop here, and a full stop. I can only see 3 full stops. So actually this is quite a free poem. So I'm not really seeing short sentences. I'm not going to think about narrative voice here, but I might do if I saw I or you. I think that's enough for structure. I'm going to come back to those ideas later. Moving on to step 3, I now need to look at the poem's use of language techniques. So on the right hand side again, you'll see some common language techniques that we can use in poetry. Semantic field is a really easy one to look for. Semantic field is basically words linked to a certain theme or idea. So I'm going to have a little look through. I'm going to read it through line by line. Autumn arrives like an experienced robber. Okay, I'm going to come back to that idea of semantic field, but I've spotted here a simile, like an experienced robber. Let me think about that for a moment. Like an experienced robber. Now a robber, I think straight away of something negative. Robbers make me think of people who cause chaos. Maybe they're a little bit sinister. Okay, but that word experience is quite interesting. It's someone that has done it before. Someone that has got experience in something is quite usual. It's expected. So I'm thinking about autumn. Actually, maybe this is showing that autumn maybe steals, or could autumn steal? It could steal the joy of summer. But it's an experienced robber, which means it's maybe expected. Let's keep going. Grabbing the green stuff. Grabbing the green stuff. That word is a verb, grabbing. If I grab something, that makes me think of almost like a violence. Almost again like a sinister idea. Okay. The green stuff. Then cunningly covering his tracks. Okay, I've got the word cunningly here. It's an adverb. Cunningly suggests it's kind of an evil character. Now, I'm just going to pause. Can I see any other techniques? Actually, I can see personification here as well. And autumn, I'm going to write down on my poem. I'm going to make loads and loads of notes. Is personified. Now, what kind of person it's personified as is as a robber or a thief. Let me keep going. Grabbing the green stuff, then cunningly covering his traps with a deep multitude of colourful distractions. I'm going to look at that word colourful. I've already thought about that kind of sinister effect of autumn being maybe a thief or something negative, but the word colourful makes me think of something quite beautiful. Maybe something quite interesting and unique. So maybe autumn's not just this horrible thing, maybe there are some nice things as well. And the wind is his accomplice, putting an air of chaos. Oh, I like that word, chaos. It's making me think of kind of a lack of control. Chaos is quite frightening. Okay, into the careful diversions. So branches shake and dead leaves are suddenly blown. That word suddenly is making me think it's maybe a bit surprising. Maybe people, even though autumn, like I've looked up here with the word experience, is something that happens every year, maybe it always takes people by surprise, and it's maybe kind of a shocking event, almost as if you were being robbed. Dead leaves are suddenly blown into the faces of inquisitive strangers. The theft chills the world. The theft chills the world. Now I'm thinking here, this is autumn. I like the fact that autumn is being described as a theft. That's a metaphor. And it chills the world. Chills makes me think of almost like if you've got chills, it's like fear. It's like a very negative emotion, almost painful. Maybe a loss of joy. Okay. Changes the temper of the earth till the normally placid sky glows red with a quiet rage. Let me just think about this here. The normally placid sky glows red. Placid means peaceful. Glows red with a quiet rage. And look here, quiet rage is quite an interesting phrase. And actually, people who rage are usually quite loud. So a quiet rage is quite interesting. I'm going to say that's an oxymoron. Looking at my list, I've got one here. Look, oxymoron. And I'm thinking again, maybe quiet makes me think of peaceful. Whereas rage makes me think again of that idea of fear or chaos. Now I want to think finally about the semantic field idea. So I made loads of notes about this poem, but I'm going to look particularly at a semantic field. And actually all the way through I've noticed a semantic field of chaos. So I've got things like chills, chaos, disruption, grabbing. Okay, that idea of kind of a horrible experience. Okay, so I've really gone to town on my language features. Now I need to put it into a plan. So to do this, I need to review all of my notes. I'm going to start in the middle actually with structure. Now you just sketch this out on your exam paper, but I've just typed it up so you can see it. So going back to structure, which was step 2, I noticed there's 3 verses, a regular rhythm, and there's enjambment. So actually, if I'm thinking about the ideas that I pulled out here in step 3, I think that those are maybe to do with that idea of chaos. The 3 verse, the irregular rhythm, the enjambment are all to do with a lack of control, a lack of structure. So I'm going to write those down here. 3 verse, enjambment, and irregular rhythm. I need to make notes. They all create chaos, a lack of structure, maybe a sense of fear, a sense of disruption. So autumn, if I'm thinking about my question, autumn maybe is quite a chaotic experience because it changes the world so dramatically. Okay, now going back to language features, I'm going to think of my top 3 language features I noticed in the poem straight away. I'm going to talk about the personification of autumn. Let me just check what it was. Personification of autumn as a robber or thief. And that made autumn sound quite sinister. I'm going to talk about the semantic field linked to chaos. And that was words like chills. And I'm going to review my poem. I'm also going to look at the oxymoron, quiet rage, to suggest maybe the idea of peaceful side of autumn. And I'm going to look at the word colourful as well, which I link to maybe beauty. So that autumn has got this kind of chaotic, sinister atmosphere, but also maybe has this kind of more serene, peaceful sense. Okay. Finally then I need to fill in my intro, so that's where I just use my own words. So I'm going to think of some words, reviewing my notes again, that I would use to describe autumn. So looking at these, I've written things like destructive, unwelcome, it's sinister, but also the idea that it's maybe beautiful, it's expected. So let me just pop some of those words in. Destructive, chaotic, unwelcome, disruptive, sinister, but also maybe the idea of beauty and kind of a peaceful or tranquil. Okay, so I've got loads of words there. Now let's just review those steps. So I've got to the end of my planning now. So step 1, read through the poem and the question, annotate and highlight the keywords. 2, analyse the structure of the poem, identify the rhyme scheme, the rhythm, look for any enjambment, the number of stanzas, label them all up. 3, analyse the language of the poem, read through the poem, find 3 language features. I actually found 4, but that's okay. The more the merrier. That link to the question focus, really important. I'm keeping linking it back. Then I would explode my quotes, looking for the following. So sound level, can I see any sounds, harsh, soft, can I see any sibilants and why they might be used? And actually I saw sibilants in the word sinister. So actually I'm going to just go back to my plan and add that on. So I saw sibilants here in the word sinister, which creates that kind of scary, eerie effect. And then word level, what do the words refer to, why might they have been used? And then device level, can I see repetition, personification, simile, metaphor? I found loads of these. What might the effect of that be? And I've thought about that. Create a plan that plans out my intro, my structural points, my language points, and then I'm writing for around 30 minutes, 25 once I've done my planning. So finally then, this is an example of a full answer, where I start with my introduction. That is all in my own words. where you can see in bold, I've put in the words from my plan. So I've written, throughout autumn, bold presents the effects of autumn to be destructive and unwelcome, because as autumn arrives, it creates a sense of chaos and disruption, almost in a sinister way due to the lack of control and sudden change that this season creates. However, autumn is also presented as a reassuring presence. Despite the fact that it regularly causes severe disruption, it is something that people learn to expect each year as part of the rhythm of the seasons and nature, and over time becomes a welcome and almost beautiful presence. So I've made sure that in my introduction I've included all of the ideas that I picked out earlier in my plan. I'll tick that. Then I wrote my paragraph on structure. So I just named structural techniques used by the poet, thought about why they might have used them, and I really importantly linking back to the question focus, which is the effects of autumn. So I wrote, in terms of structure, bold uses free verse. I've just named a technique there in the poem because the poem is not rhymed. This may reflect the idea of change, as autumn is a season where there are significant changes in nature and the weather, therefore causing a sense of chaos and a lack of structure. Furthermore, the poet uses enjambment to further emphasise this sense of change, highlighting the lack of control and order that autumn causes, the overwhelming effects being reflected in the overflowing lines. So you can see my paragraph on structure is not very long, but it's got everything that it needs to include. And really importantly, you're seeing in my writing lots and lots of these: because, but, so, furthermore, therefore. And you can also see things like this may, this might, that shows I'm really considering and thinking about the poem. Finally, I've written my longest paragraph about language because I've got the most notes about that, where I just name language features used by the writer that I picked out. I include quotations and explain why the writer might have used these features, linking back to the question. So let's take a look at that. I wrote, in terms of language, bold uses a semantic field of chaos, put some quotes in, shake, blown, chills, rage, to suggest that autumn causes problems and turmoil. Then I've zoomed in on a word. The word chills suggests discomfort and a somewhat sinister atmosphere because usually, now I've got to explain what this word means, chills are associated with feelings of fear, emphasising the huge impact of autumn. Next technique here, bold personifies autumn, cunningly his accomplice, to suggest that autumn is purposefully destroying their peace, implying that it is evil and forceful. Throughout autumn, bold also presents autumn to be somewhat reassuring. Bold uses a simile, like an experienced robber, to describe autumn's approach. The word experienced implies that it is a recurring event, therefore suggesting that the people which autumn is dawning on are prepared for its arrival. Bold uses the phrase colourful distraction to suggest that autumn also brings positive things to distract from all of the chaos it creates. The adjective colourful has connotations of happiness and freedom, so we associate these positive ideas with autumn. Bold uses juxtaposition in the last line, quiet rage, followed by a full stop, which forces the reader to pause and think. Rage suggests violence and anger, however, when paired with quiet, we get the impression that it's not disturbing or problematic, but maybe even beautiful, as it glows red, with glows having connotations of spirituality and innocence. Now, all I've done there is pretty much listed a technique and explained the effect. Now, this gets, if I was going to give this a mark, this gets 24 out of 24, and it's a 4-mark answer. So use that as an example to write yours when you write your own unseen poetry question. Okay, so just to recap then, this is our final steps. These are our final steps. Good luck with this question. Thank you.